Welcome to Learn from a Leader, the series that provides insight and practical tips to help you be a leader right where you are in your career. If we haven't met yet, my name is Jen Mueller. I am the founder of Talk Sporty to Me, and I am a 20-year sports broadcasting veteran. I currently work on the television broadcast for the Mariners and the radio broadcast for the Seahawks, which is how I met today's guest. Michael Gervais is a high-performance psychologist working in the trenches of high-stakes environments with some of the best in the world. He trains the mindset skills and practices essential to pursuing and revealing one's potential. His clients include world record holders, Olympians, internationally acclaimed artists and musicians, MVP from every major sports, and Fortune 100 CEOs. I am so thrilled to have a more formal conversation of the ones that, Michael, you and I would have normally on the planes or in the hotels when we're traveling with the Seahawks. This is fun.
Jen, thank you for including me in your mission. And so I'm absolutely looking forward to the conversation as well.
Yeah, here's a few other things that you should know before we dive into this conversation. Michael is the co-founder of Compete to Create. That is a digital platform business helping people become their best through mindset training. He is also the host of Finding Mastery, a podcast that takes you inside the rugged and high stakes environment of those on the path to mastery to explore how they train their minds to be the very best. And that is where I want to start today's conversation, because I think this is so interesting. As I watch all the work that you're doing and the people that you talk to, what factors determine if somebody is on the path to mastery?
Oh, that's a beautiful question because it's not an easy answer and it's complicated actually. But I'm going to make this as simple as I can. Is that let's go upstream one level from that and say the path is the goal. And so what does that mean? It means that you're committed to the nuances of deep understanding to be able to artistically express those understandings. Oh boy. Like we just got esoteric quickly. I realize that. But what we're talking about is having a command of your inner life so that you can access the craft that you've been training and to be able to express whatever the craft is. It could be parenting, it could be, sports, obviously, and it could be anything that you're passionate about. To be able to access that craft, refine that craft, and express that craft under any circumstance. And that's really what high performance and mastery is about, to be able to have such a refined skill, access to that skill, and then to express it eloquently on demand. That really is what we're wanting to refine and help other people develop. And so that's the essence of mastery.
And so while that got esoteric very quickly, here's what you really just pointed out. We look at high performing people, athletes, CEOs, the founders of tech companies that turn around and get sold for billions of dollars. And we think that things are just easier for them because it looks easier for them, right? Just because you have mastered something or are on the path to mastery does not mean that something is easier. It means that you can make it look easy by doing what you were just saying.
Yeah, so here's an easy example to make it even more concrete is that if we were playing tennis and you are really good at tennis and I'm not so good at tennis, is that I'm trying to keep up with you because I'm playing frame 1 and frame 2 and frame 3. And what are the frames? Like, okay, the ball's coming across the court. Where might it go? Let me try to get over there. Oh, I'm supposed to have my feet kind of wide and rotate to hit the ball. Okay, but you're really good at it. And you're picking up all these other nuances about weather conditions, about where my eyes are looking, about ball trajectory. And you're looking at you're playing a different game because you understand the nuances at such a deep level. So you are more masterful than a beginner, that I am. And those entrepreneurs and artists and executives and athletes that have developed a practice that is deep, they have a purpose that is clear. They have a way to have feedback loops about how they're getting better. So there's some sort of mechanism, say, I'm on track, I'm off track. And that usually comes from technology or experts in the field or some video looping to say, this is what good looks like and this is what not so good looks like. Those are some of the mechanisms that help us get better. But the deeper mechanisms are, how are you mastering self? And so there's two types of mastery of craft and mastery of self. And mastery of self is, can you live in the present moment? That takes time, and that is hard to do because our minds are not trained and conditioned to live in the present moment. We are better at distraction. We are better at entertaining shiny objects. We are better at the easy path rather than the hard path from a mental perspective. And so helping people, this is my life purpose, helping people train their minds so they can live in the present moment more often. And I'll end you with this, Jen, is that why is that important? Is because in the present moment is where high performance is revealed, but it's where wisdom is expressed. It is where all things that are amazing and beautiful and good and true are experienced. So the keyhole is being and living in the present moment.
And mind blown on just the thought of what that means. But here's what I'm fixated on. The part about how we look for easy over difficult, right? I get that part. But when you say it in terms of living in the present and being present, why is the present difficult? To me, right? If you just take a look at like the big view, wouldn't it be easier to live in the present? And yet, to your point, exactly. My mind wants to replay what happened yesterday, 2 weeks ago, and then start predicting what's going to happen in a month.
Okay, so let's separate something for a nuance here between your brain and your mind. Okay, so the brain is the 3 pounds of tissue that sits in your skull. And the mind, let's call that the hardware. And the mind is the software that has a relationship with the hardware. Okay, so your brain has one dictum: survival. So, what it's supposed to do above all else is scan the world around you and figure out all the things that could go wrong that are potentially dangerous. That is what your brain is doing. Your mind is this filter, it's the software that's trying to make sense of the world around you. And so, that meaning making machine of your mind is basically like saying, okay, well, that's actually okay. It could be a threat, but you have the skill to deal with that. So, that's actually not really a threat. Maybe we could look at that as a challenge or an opportunity. And so this is why our minds, if left, I'm sorry, this is why, yeah, our minds, if left unchecked, our brain begins to win. If we don't develop our mental skills, our brain, just survival, will win. And survival shows up like, hey, I got to solve that thing. I've got some thing I got to solve for in the future. And so it starts to ruminate and starts to think and it starts to try to figure it out. If that's left unchecked, we call that anxiety. If you're constantly living and thinking about things that happened in the past that didn't go well or should have gone a little bit better or differently, well, that's a whole different set of challenges that take place. My point is, your mind, if you train your mind, you can teach your brain how to live in the present moment more often. How? By developing confidence. That is a skill. That is not something that's reserved for the strong humans. That is a skill that we need to all cultivate. But you know what, Jen? People don't teach it to us. Where did you learn confidence? You have it, but where did you learn it?
You know what's so funny is that I just wrote in my journaling, which is a practice I have developed in the last year, along with meditation, which I completely negated up until that point. And I wrote down, read a book on gaining confidence, because for whatever the reason, 2 days ago, I felt it all slipping away. And it's so funny that you say that. And I'm so far off where I thought this conversation was going to go. And it's okay because I love it. But I do want to know, there are things that I'm very confident. I am confident in my competencies, right? I am confident in being able to deliver a good interview and being able to talk in front of people in just about any situation. But when you talk about internal confidence and can I just show up someplace and be confident, I struggle with that.
Yeah. And it's because we're not taught it. Like, I didn't learn it in grade school. I didn't learn in high school or college. Like, I, it was an accident that I learned it because I studied the field of psychology. And so there's no shortcuts to building confidence or high performance even. But here is the essence of confidence. It comes from one place and one place only, which is what you say to yourself. So if you speak to yourself in a credible way about what is possible for you based on what you think the challenge ahead of you is, That's where confidence comes from. But it's got to be credible, and you have to have the accurate appraisal, fancy word, for what you think the challenge is ahead of you. So let me pull on this thread one more time. Is confidence important? Yes. How do you develop confidence? Have awareness of your inner dialogue. Speak to yourself in ways that you earn the right to say, I can do difficult things. And then that's the essence of it. But it's a practice.
So, what happens if I, as a human being, have this tendency to be self deprecating? So, in my journal, every morning, I will write down 5 statements that I know to be true, right? And I have used that to ask for more money and to be able to articulate my value as a speaker and as a trainer. I have used that to reinforce beliefs that I have about myself, right? So I have these I am statements that I write down. And then sometimes during the course of the day, I have these self deprecating moments, or it's my father's voice or my mother's voice coming through. How much of that self talk always has to be on the confidence scale versus am I allowed just that one off, or does that plant the wrong seed?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Um, One thought is way too transient. Like it doesn't hold enough weight. But the way thoughts work is that when we have lots of thoughts, it turns into a thought pattern. And then once we have a thought pattern that's pretty well grooved, it turns into a habit of thought. And habits of thought, just like all habits, move below our awareness so that we can be automatic with it. So it's a slippery slope, but no, one little self-deprecating whatever is, it's kind of funny. But if that is a pervasive pattern that you're like, oh, I'm not smart enough for that, that's for other smart people. Well, eventually that's going to turn into a thought pattern, and so that's where it starts to get really close to, oh, well, maybe I'm not smart and I can't do hard things. And so I've spent a lot of time trying to rewire the way that I spoke to myself in my 20s, because in my 30s, because I didn't have this proper level of training. So step one is becoming aware. Step two is choosing productive thoughts that build my sense of self. And if we're not careful, this slips right into like Stuart Smalley, like, gosh darn it, I'm good enough. And people like, that's so corny, kind of big-eyed way of thinking about it. I want to put a sharp stick or sharp edge to the stick, which is like everything you say is taking you somewhere. And I want to be great at my thoughts because I know that thoughts and emotions work together. And when I want to go into a challenging environment, because that's what makes us now. When we go to challenging environments, do we have the inner skills to manage it? The inner skills are really managing the emotional part of it, right? It's not a thinking part. It's can I manage my emotions in this electric environment? Guess what? That electric environment could be in the living room with a conversation with a loved one. And if you lose your emotions, you're not going to find the right words to share how much you care and solving the problems together. You get pissed off, you start to critique and defend yourself and stonewall a little bit from the other person. And that's just because emotions took over and we lost access to our thinking mind. So here's what I'm committed to for myself is working on awareness of how my thoughts and emotions work together so that I'm practiced at it so I can go into highly emotionally charged environments and be present and be calm. Calm and confidence are both skills. They're different. Being calm is a skill, and we can practice that as well. We can talk about that if you want. But it doesn't, like you said, meditation, if you're not aware, it's a bit of a fool's game. And so that's why meditation has caught such wildfire. I've been meditating for 22 years, and I'm so happy that we're having this international conversation about paying attention to your inner life. And so for psychology, this is a really important moment with the pandemic, with racial injustice, because that's all built on biases and old ideas about how people are when they're flat out not true. So psychology is having a moment right now, and I couldn't be more happy to help people understand their own psychology.
So, as we're going through this conversation, to me, it seems very obvious that if you don't work on this part of yourself, it's hard as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, as somebody who's an aspiring leader to be successful. But at what point did you recognize that there was a connection here? It had to be more than just studying psychology, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so look, I'm going to take you back for a quick story, right? And so you and I are both fortunate to work with some of the most extraordinary thinkers and doers on the planet. And the Seattle Seahawks are an incredible organization, both from the humans inside of it and what the brand stands for, but it's really the humans that are amazing. Rewind when I was 15 years old, and I was a good little athlete, and surfing was my first sport. But what happened for me is there's two types of surfing. There's free surfing and then there's competitive surfing. During free surfing, it's kind of like practice in traditional stick and ball sport. I could do it. I could do what I could do it and at a really high level. But then come game day, which is competitive surfing, that was a mess. I was 15 and I didn't know what it was. I just knew that my body didn't change overnight and my technique didn't get lost at breakfast. But all of a sudden, as soon as there was people on the beach judging, friends were out, the lights were on, so to speak, I didn't have the inner skills to manage that. So I was struggling in one particular heat. And this competitor, he was like 6 years older than me, and he paddled by me, perfect conditions in the water, glassy, it's like 7 a.m., about head high waves, dream condition, and I'm a disaster. And he paddles by me and he says, Gervais, I see you out here every day. He says, you just got to stop worrying about what could go wrong. And then he paddled off. And I thought to myself, how the hell does he know what I'm thinking? Like, yeah, I'm consumed with all the things that could go sideways. And so I said, well, shit, that's not working. What do I do? And so, kind of a 15-year-old scrappy kid, I said, well, let me just think about what could go right. And so I started using some imagination out there. And then before you know it, I felt different. And I got to the end of that competition or to that heat. I said, what is that to all my friends? And they're like, I don't know, dude, like your mind's not right. I said, what is the mind? I didn't even know what it was as a 15-year-old kid. Little did I know that there was a whole discipline of psychology, let alone a sub-discipline of high performance psychology. And so that's where it started. I earned it from, real pain of suffering, of feeling small, feeling insignificant, feeling like I only mattered if I had great results. And I was beholden to my environment. And so my environment was dictating my inner experience. And what I've learned is that the most dynamic humans on the planet, they do not let the environment dictate their internal experience. Their internal experience influences the environments they're in. Think about Dr. Malcolm King Jr., think about Harriet Truman, think about, go down the list, Mother Teresa, think about Gandhi. Their inner experience dictates every room that they go in. And so that's both about mental skills and inner skills, as well as purpose, having a really clear purpose. And all of that is part of psychology.
And how does all of that fit into now? Because it is not a coincidence that we are talking about this more now in the last 8 months in a pandemic than I think we probably ever have at any point in time. What does all of this mean when it feels so uncertain? Right? It feels like next week is uncertain, next month. I know it's about being present, but how do I even know what to focus on when I don't know what's going on?
Yeah, because our first principles, many of our first principles and things that we thought were true, like a graceful, handoff of power from a presidential standpoint, we just assume that that's true. We just assume that we could go outside and not wear masks. So some first principles got challenged. And the truth about uncertainty is that every moment for your entire life, you have dealt with uncertainty. Right now, for example, in just a friendly conversation, I barely know what I'm going to say. I'm uncertain about what I'm going to say. You can't begin to know what I'm going to say if I don't know what I'm going to say. So even every conversation you've ever had, there's a degree of uncertainty because the unfolding, unpredictable moment is always at play. But what we do as humans is we create shortcuts. They're called heuristics. Right? That's a very technical term. And those shortcuts are ways that we can feel okay, but we're not actually getting to the depth and the truth of the uncertainty that sits underneath of it. Right now, the uncertainty is in our face. And because the first principles are shook up, and we don't have, as a nation, let's just speak of our nation right now, of the United States. As a nation, we don't have the mental skills and tools to deal with this rapid changing uncertainty. This is why, prior to COVID, social injustice, and the political race, 30% of Americans reported anxiety, a clinical disorder, a mental disorder of how you're using your inner life to work with the external world around you. We call it anxiety. 30% had that experience. Now it's higher. And so, what does that mean? It means we never had the skills. We just had a lot of talent. And the talent, our nation was working. And we had luxury and we had air conditioning and we could go outside and we're kind of like these, the American way. And that's being redirected right now. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I sat down with the CEO of J. Crew, amazing human, Jen Singer. And she said, we're going to see if our nation is built on entitlement or grit. And I'm afraid that we've come up short because most people are looking for relief of their anxiety as opposed to doubling down like our grandparents did, that great generation that they said, whatever it takes for the greater good, I'm in. And let's figure this out together. They went to war, right? And that's why I have such high regard for those that pay the ultimate sacrifice for the greater good. And so where did I just take us? Sometimes I just get on a soapbox. I'll apologize. But I'll tell you this, Jen, I love what we are going through for this reason. People are suffering. I'm suffering in ways, and it's forcing us to invest in the inner life and to invest in the deeper parts of being alive. And it's going to give us a chance, if we do this right, to reimagine what it means to be human. This next decade is going to be epic.
I like the way that you put a positive spin towards this one. Do you have time for 2 more questions?
I'm with you.
Okay, I got one from Kristen who emailed this knowing that we were going to have a conversation. Now, Kristen is a winemaker friend of mine. And I think you and I were talking about this a little bit. You know that I'm an extrovert. Kristen is an extrovert as well. And while Zoom is great for connecting to some degree, there is definitely something that's lost. How do you overcome that feeling? I know that that's one of the ways that we're all being challenged, but is there something we can tap into to overcome just feeling like it's still not enough?
What do you mean? Overcome what feeling?
Overcome the feeling that, yeah, I'm on Zoom, but I'm still not really connecting. I'm still not really in the room full of people. I'm still not able to be my extrovert self around people.
Oh, it's going to challenge you. Yeah. I don't think there's an easy fix for that. So extroversion, let's kind of harden it a little bit. Extroversion is this idea that you find energy from being around others. But really, what it's also about is that you think and you process by moving your lips. So introverts process by absorbing, thinking, feeling, but when it comes out, they've already processed it. Extroverts, I'm an extrovert as well. We're thinking when our lips are moving. And so it's 2 parts. It's energy from being around others. And then what's happening likely is that we are beginning to realize when there's 20 people on a screen, like, wow, am I the only one? I can't be the only one that talks. This isn't right. So it's forcing us to access our introverted side. So there's an opportunity to get better at introversion. And I don't think that it's ever going to be as rewarding for either introverts or extroverts because we don't have that physical thing that takes place when we're around somebody. And that physical thing, whether it's a touch or just being close enough for a touch, we actually produce oxytocin. And oxytocin is a neurochemical called the cuddle chemical. And I don't know this for sure, but I don't know the research on this because I haven't seen it. I don't think it exists. I don't think oxytocin is as available over technology that it is in person. So there's actually a neurochemical exchange that is wanting. And so, how are we going to solve it? I don't know. I think keep listening, keep asking people about their feelings, keep sharing what you're grateful for. I think we got to work on a deeper level rather than kind of some of the surface stuff. And that might help.
Yeah, it will. Okay, last question for you. I have seen this on some of your Instagram feeds and stories that on occasion you will text people that you work with, some of your clients, some of your high performing clients, and you'll just give them a prompt. And it could be everything from what gave you joy today to what have you overcome in the last week. And I think it's so fascinating. You'll post their responses, not with their names. And I think it's so fascinating. And I'm wondering if we can wrap up this conversation with maybe a prompt or two that you have used with some of your clients just to get us thinking, to get us very present, and maybe to give us something like to help other people with.
Yeah, so I think what you're referring to is a fun exercise I did with some Olympians, and I text about 6 medalists, and I just asked them a series of questions. Like each Monday, I asked them a question, and I screen grabbed without their names and just posted it. And one of the questions was, and we could all do this, is like, when was the last time you had a sense of peace? When was the last moment you had a sense of peace? And I think that it's a really hard question for so many of us because we're so busy and we're so active and we're so anxious and we're trying to solve things. Like, when was the last time you had a sense of peace? That would be a cool one for us to do, and for your community to do. Another one would be, when was the last time that you had a sense of awe? And so awe is this, it's the way that I measure daily success, is how many times can I feel a sense of awe? And so awe is when the vastness of a opportunity, a moment meets like the nanosecond of right now. And so it's like there's this beautiful thing that could be and is, and I'm totally connected to it right now. For me, I get a sense of awe when my hair stands up across my body. And it usually happens for me in conversations. Like when somebody's speaking truth and they're feeling it in a way where their thoughts and their words are lined up, I'm a sucker for it. And I get sucked right into that truth when thoughts and emotions and words are lined up. And so, when was the last time you felt a sense of awe? And when was the last time you felt a sense of peace?
I love that. And those are the prompts that we're going to leave folks with. I hope that they send them in. I hope that they share them with their peeps and maybe start some conversations and being more present. As you could tell, since we're both extroverts, I could keep this conversation going for a very long time, but I'm not going to. I am going to sign off as I promised. How can people find more about your offerings, your podcast, and connecting with you?
I want to do something really fun. Anyone who tags us online, you drive this, okay? I want to give, it's a $500 course. I want to give away 2 of them to your listeners, okay? So it's a 8-week mindset training course. Each one's valued at $500. I want to give 2 away to anyone in your community that wants to train their mind. And I want to share this. It's my life purpose, and it's something that Coach Carol and I built together, this 8-week online course. And I want to share 2 of them with anyone in your community. How do you find me? At Michael Gervais, Gervais, on all the social handles. And then the podcast is Finding Mastery.
Awesome. Thank you for spending some time with us today.
Appreciate you, Jen.